fortunate to have the support of the Lincoln School Foundation. It seems similar to the Brookline grant opportunities. And one of the first things that happened to me when I started teaching in Lincoln on Hanscom 6 years ago now was my students just didn't seem very engaged. And sixth grade math was something they've pretty much been doing in all of elementary school, and we're trying to, as it's been said at some of the PDs, have been to zip it up, just wrap it all up. And so one thing was, I'm thinking I'm doing sixth grade math every day in my own projects that I'm doing at home, programming and stuff like that. So I started doing the flipped classroom, as you said, just as an outlet to engage students at home. And what happened was I had more time in class. I wasn't teaching a lesson in class anymore. The students were coming with notes from a lesson they had previously done. And
before you go on with that, can you describe, because some folks in the audience or some people at home may not understand what a flipped classroom is. Could you maybe describe what that is and how that actually manifested in your classroom from day to day?
Sure. And so originally the flipped classroom's idea was mainly for high school. I missed class. I'm behind. What do? So teach. I'm not going to misquote his name. He started by making a video lesson of his class so that those students could catch up. And then everyone's taken it and done whatever they want with it at this point. Essentially, you could think of the creative video lesson. You could think Khan Academy. And students watch a video, and then they come do the homework at home. That was the, in class, sorry. That's the flipped part. How it happened for me was my students didn't always do their homework for one reason or another. And so I wanted to give them something to do at home that they didn't need help, that was meaningful. And a video of me, they found that funny. They found it interesting. I wear my different ties in there. That's how I kind of check if you watch it.
Can you show your tie that you're wearing?
Just
it's
one of the
cat and mouse.
One of the quick checks, did you watch the video? What did I wear? You know, what tie did I wear? Students come and tell me, I think you recorded that one in your truck. And so that interesting conversation starters. And through the use of technology, I'm able to actually assess whether they watched it or not, if they got it or not, and adjust what we do in class that day. And what I found was that with all the time I had, I was doing more kill and drill, I guess, than I ever thought I would do, where we were just practicing, word problems. And so I heard about 3D printing 3 years ago, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and thought that we should get one of these. And the first one was grant through Donors Choose, a competition from code.org. If you get this many hours of coding done by this certain time, we'll give you $500 on Donors Choose, and we got a printer. And so it's definitely not the technology that should drive the teaching, but it was a tool that we had that I felt like, well, now I have to figure out how to use it, and I should for the students. And so that's where these projects have come from, some 3D printing in math class. And if you don't know what 3D printing is, I can show a real quick video in a moment. And just the reason I really love it is because it is engaging. Compelling is this thing that it's part of STEM or STEAM or DREAM, whatever acronym you do, but the math is generally, it seems to be left out, or it's a footnote, or it's assumed that we understand that all of this works because of the math. But a sixth grade student, they go to sixth grade science and they don't get it. They don't make the connection that you need to use the math that you already know. This isn't new. And it's very frustrating as a math teacher. It's not the student's fault. It's not necessarily my fault. It's we're in a new age now where we have to we shouldn't have maybe science or math class. We should have just education. And so the tangible part of these 3D projects, they take them home and they could talk to their parents, and the students have talked about math at home. And I think that's, if I had to say how do you grade how this is working out, it's the student just talked about math at the dinner table on their own. It's exciting. And so I think 3D printing is awesome, and I think everyone else should too, if you don't. And we also were speaking about students connecting to real life. I don't know if anyone's read the 36-page document from NASA about colonizing Mars. In there they lay out in 10 years there will be jobs for 3D printing structures on Mars to live. And there's companies currently vying for those contracts. Yeah, I read The Martian to students a little bit this year, blanked out a bit, and we did math around The Martian because it was more compelling. It takes a lot of time, but the kids appreciate it and they understand it. So that's why another reason why 3D printing is important. It's not easy to do, which is why I continue to do it in class. You need to problem solve with scale factors all the time, which is 6th grade math, fraction decimal operations. So if you don't know what 3D printing is, this is the first print job I ever did. I think it took 8 hours to print. I was going to throw the machine away. And you'll see in a moment that it's working on an XY just like a printer, and then it adds the Z level up and down. And this was just a case for an Arduino microcontroller that we had in our classroom that students were able to use. We didn't design this. We went online, found it, printed it, and students 3 years ago were very excited to start 3D printing, and we all found out that it's a lot harder than we thought it would be. And let's see, it should be. So here's just a couple of examples of 6th grade math and 7th grade math being used in the classroom. You have a maze. Some student wanted to create a maze, and I said, sure, I'll get back to you tomorrow, because at the time, at least, I felt like I had to know a little bit more than them. But I also felt like if someone came in and asked, like, this is great, but what math are you doing? I felt like I wanted to be able to say that we're doing math, and I knew it was in there. And this is actually, I don't have the expression, the inequality up here to show, because it's just an example here. But this is actually following the inequality. I believe they solve 20 is greater than or equal to 4x plus 2, something like that. And those are in millimeters. And so our print bed is 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. We measured the ball bearing that we stole from my children at home for the maze, and it took them a while to really understand, which is great, that we had to have that constant of plus 2, because if you repeated your 4x, which was the thickness of the wall and the thickness of your path, then you always ended up with double walls or an extra wall or missing a wall. So we had to have that constant where we actually started on one side with the wall, and we talked about algebraic expressions to do this, and that's a real key concept that we were doing in 6th grade. The blue one's a Greek temple. They do ancient civilizations in 7th grade. Architecture. If you want to do 3D printing, think about architecture, and these guys will talk maybe a little more about, sort of. But architecture is amazing. There's math everywhere in there, and kids love it. So we were doing scale factors in 7th grade, and said, hey, you're studying ancient Greek civilization, so go research the Parthenon or whatever you want, and if you need some help, I'm here. So in order to print this, they had to have done it right, I guess. I'm not going to print a blob or something to put on my wall that doesn't actually look like the Parthenon, because that would be silly. And so they get motivated to know when they've done it right. The bottom left one's a factor lattice, and I just wanted students to do 2 things. When am I done factoring a number? No one could tell me that. And it's not their fault. It's not their teacher's fault. It's no one's fault. When am I done factoring a number? How do I know that? And my question was, how do I get kids to go home and talk about factoring numbers? And so this is just a factor lattice that uses prime factorization. We have the Common Core standards that I do teach. And it says students should be able to prime factor and use it, period. Cool, thank you. What should I do with it? And so you can simplify fractions with that, but good luck convincing a student who already knows the answer to most of these to use that, so that when they get to the problem that's really hard, know to use that. So this uses prime factorization. You prime factor the number 30, and you get, let's see if I can do it, 2 times 3 times 5. And all of those are 2 to the 1, 3 to the 1, and 5 to the 1, and they all come out of 1, which is any number to the 0. And you then fill in the lattice, and 2 times 5 is 10, and it turns out that 6 times 5 is 30, and those are all of the factors of 30. You can use this, we can go further, and the math is college level math to understand why it's working and all that, but you can apply this to least common multiples as well, combine two lattices and fill everything in and you find their least common multiple. So it's very cool. And then gears, it's a very terrible project, but it actually uses, example of the project, it uses circles, ratios of diameters to create a gear ratio of, I think this one's 10 to 20 maybe, and why, one turns 10 times, one turns 20 times, 2-to-1 ratio. And at MassQ on Thursday, I was able to speak to some people about integrating ratios of forces into this project, which is something we do in science class, and make it a little more for the students to come up with something new on their own. Yeah. So those are just some examples of some of the projects that are using 6th grade math, 7th grade math, and are engaging students in thinking about using the math. And so another project we do is the Tangram project. Give them the picture and ask them to put it on a grid. I think it's a 40 by 40 grid, which is the least common multiple of all of the denominators, which I tell them, most of them glaze over. But, telling them to design this project, I used your math that we just did, or that you should know already, and then throw a wrench in there and say, sorry, I only want this to be an 8-centimeter puzzle when we're done. And the iPad app that they use requires them to multiply anything to scale it. So they have to multiply by decimals to scale it. And how do I do that? What should I multiply? And it's fun. We get a dry erase marker, go to the board, and start trying stuff. And hopefully they can find the pattern to figure out how to make this process easier on the next scale factor that I need. And I don't have a Tangram project with me, but this is actually the factor lattice printed out right here. And it failed a little bit because the design didn't actually stick here, but that's fine. It's awesome. And the students, the reason I don't have any Tangram projects is because they all took those home, which is awesome as well. This is the most successful project we've had so far, and the most that have been completed. Kids were coming during school, after school, lunchtime to finish it. That's kind of the carrot part. Design it, print it. And that's how I've gotten kids to my makerspace, our makerspace during lunch, is to finish these projects. So here's that project actually being printed from the top, I believe. There we go. And so how we actually design these pieces is they have a cube. It's like a Play-Doh cube, 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and they have to actually mash it using scaling factors to the shape that they want. That parallelogram, they would tell you, was the single hardest thing they've probably ever done in math. Just because the base and height that they have, the base is not the actual base of the rectangle that they need to create. And so this year, this is all a process. All of this stuff that we've been talking about today is incredible. Set your goal for 10 years from now, maybe. Write the first grant. Sorry?
Go to Mars.
Yeah, go to Mars. Well, I'm a teacher because part of the reason I'm a teacher is because what I really wanted to do didn't happen for me, which is fine. And now I'm here to try and help some other students realize those things as well. And in middle school, it's not that 10 years from now, a 6th grader is what, in college, right? So that job is there when they're in college, a couple years away from graduating. And hopefully some of them are preparing right now. I have 6 kids who read or are listening to The Martian after parental approval. And awesome. So just quick, this is the project we're doing right now in class. And we're supposed to be studying algebraic expressions and all of that kind of stuff. And I stole this from actually a Canadian education agency as well. And the idea of space stations, modular space stations. We moved into modular buildings last year. So that connection was great. The students this year don't really understand the emphasis on modular classrooms because it's something they already know from last year. So we kind of switched this up, and now the background of the project is more the Hermes spaceship station that went to Mars from The Martian. Just continuing with that, and we're going to have a competition who can defend one of these the best, or create their own and defend it the best for the style of space station. And the idea is, like, guys or girls, it's not that it's necessarily the functional space station. It's the idea of the modular, each mission. We have a new phase. How can we predict the 100th phase? Because we're never going to stop going to Mars, right? How many modules we will have, how much will that cost? And So through that, they're working on their patterns and just spatial understanding of these different rules and able to explain why I'm drawing this one, why what I drew might not be correct. And then some of these students actually thought of, well, here's the pattern, Mr. Gold, like, why do you keep asking me? And so they decided to use art so that I'd stop talking to them, and that's great. So this student he was able to write his first algebraic expressions without me. He'd never really used a variable before. And down here you can actually see that he's using pattern power, as I like to say, to write an algebraic expression, write out an explanation of how the phases are developed and stuff like that. And so the end result for one of these, and I'm not sure what the next slide is exactly. Okay. So this is the space station, and so when they go home, they can say, well, Mom, this is, we always have this part, the principal's office, a couple of engines in our cafeteria. This is when we did it last year. I don't know what the terms are going to be this year yet, talking about Martian space stations. And each phase, we're adding 8 classrooms, and hopefully they say this is our rate of growth or something that we've spoken about. And then, after 2 phases, we have 20 modules. And so this is the algebraic expression, 8x plus 4. And so, it's very cool. And kids seem to think so too. And it's very hard, which is, I think, important as well. And I throw in a couple of do nows and kill and drill problems and open responses. And this year they'll be writing their actual report and maybe even making a little brief explanation, video explanation of what they're doing, and share that with the faculty and students and have them vote on which one they think should be the space station that goes to Mars.
Great. Thank you, Josh.
Cool.